Scenes are the building blocks of stories. Every scene in a novel contributes to the story in some way, whether through characterization, atmosphere, or plot progression. In examining the anatomy of a scene, we're going to start with the big picture skeleton, then dive into the essential organs, and end with the skin, the outward appearance of the writing itself. Although scenes can take an infinite number of forms, the underlying skeleton largely remains the same. The character has a goal, but they encounter an obstacle, so they respond by formulating a new plan of action or experiencing a moment of change. This has been called the ABT formula, and, but, therefore. Trey Parker, co-creator of South Park, has explained this technique in detail. Every story can be reduced to this single structure. I can tell you the story of a little girl living on a farm in Kansas, and her life is boring. But one day a tornado sweeps her away to the land of Oz. Therefore, she must undertake a journey to find her way home. That example describes the larger plot setup, but this formula can be used on a micro scale as well, such as in the scene where Dorothy finally meets the wizard. Dorothy's goal at this point is to ask the wizard to grant their wishes, but the wizard says that in order to grant their wishes, they must bring him the Witch of the West broomstick. Therefore, Dorothy and Co. go off to kill the witch. In the next scene, they travel through the haunted forest, but the witch attacks them with winged monkeys and captures Dorothy. Therefore, Dorothy's friends must rescue her. This formula provides a series of actions and reactions, and that's the very essence of story. Think of your scenes as miniature narrative arcs. Sometimes the therefore of a scene doesn't involve the main character planning their next move, but rather it indicates a change in their mindset or relationships. For instance, at the start of a scene, a character may be excited to start their new job, but then they hear that their boss is a jerk. Therefore, the scene ends with them wondering if they'd made a mistake in changing careers. Another scene might involve the protagonist apologizing to their best friend, but they accidentally insult their friend's mom. Therefore, the scene ends with the two of them on bad terms. Good scenes often end with the promise of future conflict, whether external or internal. They leave the reader with a question, making them wonder what will happen next. The short chapters in Somerset Maugham's 1925 novel, The Painted Veil, show how scenes can build upon each other. Let's take a brief look at the first three scenes using the formula. I'll omit the and component for simplicity's sake. In scene 1, the protagonist, Kitty, is in her bedroom, having an affair with her lover. But someone tries to open the door, and Kitty thinks it's her husband. Therefore, she fears her husband has caught her in the act. Because of this fear, in scene 2, Kitty asks her lover what they should do if her husband confronts them, but her lover keeps telling her not to worry, and he leaves. Therefore, Kitty is left alone to self-reflect. Scene 3 has Kitty reflecting on her desire to be free of her husband, but she knows that her lover is also married, and to a woman of high status at that. Therefore, Kitty gets to thinking about her own social position and how she came to marry her husband, which is what the next scenes are about. There's not much outward plot progression happening, but rather Kitty's emotions and thoughts are what have shifted from scene to scene. You can create these many outlines for every scene or chapter of your novel. In each scene, your character needs a goal, an obstacle, and a source of conflict for the next scene. So that's the skeleton of a scene, the bone structure you can use as a base. But now let's look at the delicious insides, how the different parts work together to create a functioning system. Like the various organs of the body, scenes can and should accomplish multiple objectives. Writer Michael Haig said it best. In each successive scene, something must happen that has never happened before. A new situation for the hero, a new secret to reveal, a new ally to join, a new enemy to confront, a new lover to pursue, a new, even bigger problem to solve, a new tool for solving it. If scenes are interchangeable, or if nothing of significance changes from one scene to the next, you're treading water. Let's take a look at a scene from Matthew Fitzsimmons' best-selling thriller novel, The Short Drop. The protagonist, legendary hacker Gibson Vaughn, is hired to investigate a missing persons case. In Chapter 15, George Abe, the leader of the investigation, makes a surprise visit to Gibson. Here's how it opens. George was waiting for him in a black M-Class Mercedes. A long rectangular box wrapped in bright red paper with little white unicorns on it lay in the passenger seat. "What's with the box?" Gibson asked. "It's not for you." "Well, now you're just hurting my feelings." George chuckled and put the gift in the back seat and handed Gibson a sports jacket. "Put that on. We've got an appointment." Immediately in this scene, there's a sense of anticipation. The unicorn wrapping paper and the promise of an appointment create questions in the reader's mind, just as they do for the main character. The answers to these questions are slightly delayed in order to create suspense. We soon discover that in order for Gibson to officially join the team, he first needs to meet and prove himself to the investigation's benefactor, Callista. The unicorn present is for the birthday party of Callista's niece, a character who becomes significant to the plot later on. As the chapter continues, a number of objectives are accomplished. In terms of plot, Abe updates Gibson on the status of the investigation. In terms of character, Callista and her niece are introduced. In terms of reveals, Gibson learns what really happened to his father. In terms of foreshadowing, details that become important for the story's grand reveal at the end are provided in this scene. The chapter ends with Callista saying this: "It was nice to see you again, Mr. Vaughn. Good luck in Pennsylvania." The next step for Gibson is clearly laid out for the reader. He's going to Pennsylvania to continue the investigation. To reiterate, scenes can and should accomplish multiple objectives. When planning out a scene or chapter, you need to determine what you as a writer want to convey to your readers. What vital organs will give life and purpose to this scene? How are you moving the story forward in terms of character and plot? Then we need to go a step further. We need to explore the but of a scene. The last thing you want readers to think while they're reading is that a scene is slow, or boring, or pointless. You can avoid predictability by adding obstacles. Don't let your character get comfortable. To create more tension, you could add a ticking time bomb, a threat of violence, an uncomfortable setting or situation, disagreement between characters, clashing goals, the unexpected arrival of another character, heightened stakes, or any kind of surprise. I'll discuss each of these in more detail in a separate video. You don't want to add all of these obstacles into a single scene, of course. Just one additional element will do wonders. Now we arrive at the actual construction of words on the page, the appetizing flesh that covers your skeleton and organs. How should a scene look, style-wise? You can manage the pace of a scene by blending dialogue with description, action, and the protagonist's thoughts. Crack open a novel, any novel, and examine 2 random pages. I picked The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, and here's how I dissected it. At the beginning of the scene, we have a summary of what's happened since the previous scene. Then we're back in the present moment with some character movement. Then there's dialogue, and in the middle of the conversation, we have the character doing some internal reflection. Then back to dialogue, interwoven with more visuals. Some writers use dense paragraphs of description. Some writers rely heavily on dialogue. It usually depends on what the scene requires and what the writer is trying to accomplish. When reading, stop to think about the reasoning behind the writer's choices, and pay attention to how the writer transitions from internal thoughts to outward action. Once you have your scenes in mind, you may want to turn them into chapters. Authors have wildly different styles when it comes to chapter length. In The Painted Veil, for example, the chapters are often less than 1,000 words, and seem to be divided based on the small moments of conflict: the mysterious visitor, a discussion between lovers, Kitty's reflection on her lover's wife, and so on. The average chapter length of a high fantasy novel, on the other hand, is 5,000 words or more. In longer chapters, there may be several scene breaks, so a single chapter may contain 3 separate scenes. A scene could be as long as a single sentence or 50 pages, but 750 to 2,500 words is a good range. Most writers use chapters to mark a setting change or time jump, even if it's only a small one. For example, in Chapter 1, the character plans to go to the bank, so Chapter 2 opens with them already at the bank, skipping over the whole getting there process. Of course, another reason for chapter breaks is to shift to a different character's perspective, if you're writing a novel with multiple points of view. Some writers don't use chapter breaks at all. Some writers don't even use scene breaks. It's all a matter of preference, but personally, I think that chapter breaks give the reader a mental rest and help to better organize the story. With all these body parts in mind, you can see the steps it takes to create a scene. Open with a status update. What progress, or lack thereof, has your protagonist made since the previous scene? Where are your characters and who are they with? Heighten the tension and the stakes. That's the but in the formula. How can you make your character's life harder? End with a promise about the future. That's the therefore component. What conflicts will the character be facing in the next scene? So, for a writing prompt, here's what I'd like you to do. Think of a scene from the middle of your story that you haven't yet put to paper. Write a 1-paragraph summary of what you want to happen, including how the scene ends. Then, write the scene. Don't worry about making it publisher ready. Just write. Wait a week, 1 whole week. Then go back and revise the scene. Consider adding another source of tension. What questions does the scene answer, and what new ones does it create? What else could this scene accomplish that it's not already doing in terms of introducing important people, places, things, backstory, or other plot elements? That's the exercise. Summarize, write, revise. In the comments, tell me what scene you're most looking forward to creating. And whatever you do, keep writing.